You're a Reason user. Any other of you have tried? You're a Logic user? Okay, cool. Then I know kind of who I'm talking to. That's good. If you have any questions, like about anything, then just give me a shout and I'll answer it. Let me just set up the audio. So I work at Propeller as a product specialist, but I also work as a composer for movies and video games and stuff like that, which has been my primary focus for a long time. So that's kind of my background. So when I talk about this, I'll come at it primarily from a musician standpoint more than anything. And one time, I think I was in London doing a demo and someone asked me a very kind question, why the fuck should I listen to you? And I went, oh, that's me. But he had a point, you know, why should he care what I say? So I put together a small kind of demo reel with stuff I've been working on, different types of music, so at least you get an idea of where I'm coming from. I'm just going to play that really quick so you get a good idea of who I am.
Where's the treasure in that?
Kind of shows you that I've been working in a lot of different genres. I've been doing mixing, production, recording, composing, everything I've done from start to finish in Reason. So, if you don't know, Reason is music making software. That's the simplest way to put it. We have long tried to be kind of an all-in-one solution, which might sound a bit strange today. But the power of this is that when you're working in the box, you can work really fast and really effectively. And as a composer for like video games and stuff, the number one thing I need to do is get music done. Otherwise I won't get paid. So that's one of the primary reasons why I use Reason, no pun intended. Version 7 came out 2 weeks ago. And there's a couple new features in there. I could be a boring guy and go, okay, it's this and this and this and this and this. But that's not really that fun, right? So I'm going to show you what's new instead. I'm going to show you a bit, since many of you haven't used Reason. The vast majority, I'd say, 4 out of 5. No. I'm just going to show you how I would make a track using some of the new features, right? And again, any questions, please do let me know. So this is Reason when you make a new document. It's a blank slate, pretty much. If you're not, familiar with Reason, it has 3 main areas: the sequencer, which is pretty straightforward, where you record MIDI and audio; the rack, where all the stuff lives. It's all wired together, so of course you can follow the sequence flow, but this is where your instruments, your effects, and all that kind of stuff. And then we have the mixer, which I'll cover a bit later. So I want to do some kind of track. I don't really know what, so I'm going to start with just a drum loop. I'm a lazy guy, so I'm really bad with making drums. So in Reason, everything can be done from the create menu. And when I say create instrument, this is kind of an important part actually. When you're looking for instruments, you don't want to know the particular device that makes the sound. You don't want to know which plugin to load up. You just want a sound, right? So I could simply go to drum loops because I know I want a drum loop, right? And here you have stuff like brass and guitar and whatever. The focus is on the sound and not the device. Let's see, I'm probably going to do some electronic. See what this is. Now I've loaded up a drum loop. I can hit run and hear what it is. It's a couple of drums. Fair enough. I'm going to start from this. The other thing I want is, when I do music, it's really important to not only use presets. I've been a slave of presets for very, very long. So I promised myself that every session I do, I need to record one thing, that's just an instrument or whatever, and I need to make one patch. Once I have that covered, I can say this is an original piece of music without being very ashamed of it. So what I'm going to do is, I'm actually going to record my Dave Smith Mofoil. And doing so, luckily, I'll also show how MIDI out works in Reason. This is actually new to Reason 7, we're a bit slow. MIDI 1, it's 30 years old. We just got around to doing it. But part of the reason is that previously, not a lot of people own MIDI gear. It was kind of a select few that actually bought big hardware synthesizers, and they disappeared for a long time. And now it's kind of a renaissance going on, where people want old analog gear, and new analog gear is made like every single month. I feel there's a new synthesizer. So to do this, I create the external MIDI instrument, exciting times. This is pretty much just, I'm sending MIDI data via this one out to my MIDI interface. In this case, that's my Panorama keyboard right here. There's one thing I need to do though. I need the audio to come back in, right? I'm sending it from the Panorama to the Mopo, but I need to hear it, so I'll just create an audio track. Make sure it's to select the right input, it's stereo input. Here we go. So now, you see I have the audio track and the EMI in the sequence. Just make sure the monitoring is on and I can simply play my analog synth that's right here with my keyboard. I can start sequencing it and I can do a lot of fun stuff. What I really like about this is the Reason way of doing it. In Reason, like you saw before, we have all these cables and weird stuff. Half of them are audio cables, just transmitting audio from anywhere to anywhere. Quite simple, it's like any old audio cable. Then there's CV cables, and if you're going to check out Richard's workshop later, you will hear a lot about this, I'm sure. CV means control voltage. And we have basically a virtual version of this in Reason, so you can connect, for example, an LFO, like a curve, from one synthesizer to another synthesizer, or you can take an envelope from here and take it to this compressor or whatever. And this means we have a lot of tools, including pattern sequencers that are connected with gate and note CV. And I can connect this to my synth and actually use a pattern sequencer that's not at all included in the synthesizer in the rack. Let's see if I can come up with something. This is my favorite way of doing patterns. Because you don't need to think about it, you can just randomize until you get something cool. The problem is I probably want to change the key. So I'm going to go ahead and use the pattern, but I'm going to change it to something else. I'm just going to start drawing in some notes. I actually have some kind of bass line. I can tweak it live from my synth. But let's say I want to tweak it from the rack. I want to actually be inside Reason and not have to go over here. So of course, on the external MIDI instrument you can select any CC value and just create an automation lane, like the frequency for example, and draw something in. Of course, that's not a problem. But something a bit funnier is to use this guy, the CC assign rotary. Everyone knows, or if you don't, now you do, CC74 is by far the most important. That's the filter. That's the one you always want to tweak. So now I've actually assigned this rotary to the cutoff. So I can do straight from the rack. This also allows me to do stuff like plugging in something interesting into this. This matrix actually has a curve mode. So I can take this curve and route it into this rotary to control the filter. This is quite a simple example. You can do really advanced modular stuff here. You can take one LFO from one synthesizer, merge it with one LFO from another one and this curve and send it into this rotary, then create another EMI and send it to, say, the resonance. You can do quite advanced setups actually, which I'm a big fan of. In fact, I'm going to use something different instead of this curve. We have some third-party devices, I will talk more about this later. And since we have this CV thing, we get a lot of devices doing really weird stuff. Like, incredibly weird stuff. This one is called a chaotic signal generator. And it's using some terribly advanced math just to do a random signal. That's pretty much it. And this random signal can be controlled a bit, and I can send it out to wherever I want. So I send it to the filter. And now I get something that will never be the same. I have this weird signal controlling my filter. It gives me a lot of variation without having to try. And I really like that kind of lazy amount of variation when you do just random curves, random whatever. Because you don't have to think about it. And you guys, you can come in and sit down, that's okay.
That's right.
You sure?
Yeah.
Fair enough. So now that I have this going, I probably want to record it. I want it to be my baseline. This is the audio track it's playing back. I can simply just hit record. I can even tweak it in real time while I record. And then I have my audio track. So let's try that. Okay, I've got an audio track. And now I can actually remove all the others. I don't need this anymore. I have my take. It has the random element to it that I'm a big fan of. And I can start working with that instead. So one of the other new features in Reason 7 is just how we handle audio. See, when I open this, it has a couple of markers. That is basically found the different slices of my audio, found the different notes. Which means that I can do a lot of fun stuff with this. But first and foremost, I want to change the tempo. This tempo isn't quite good for dance music. I'm going to take it up a bit. Better. And the time stretching in Reason is quite good, so let's change this up a bit. I'm going to take it up quite a lot, actually. Maybe take it down. Which is really useful to have. It does it all in the background while playing back, so you're never actually stuck in the tempo you recorded it. Which people forget that music is a lot about tempo, but everyone starts their project at 120 BPM and records something and then they're stuck because they're at 120 BPM. So I'm sure that 80% of all music is probably 120 BPM, which is sad. So this is a really important feature. Another thing you can do with this is just change the phrasing of stuff. I actually have a better example of this that I'm going to use. I'm a bass player, but a very bad bass player. So one thing you can do is actually quantize a take, just to make sure that the notes hit perfectly. But in this case, I have this bass line that's kind of dull actually. I don't like that the first notes always hit on the quarter notes. Like, pretty boring. I can select a couple of these, just holding shift, and then move them back. Maybe a couple more. Move them back too. I have a much better bass line. But it sounds good. This is the important part, because many applications can do this kind of stuff, but it has to sound good too, otherwise everyone will hear you that you did some cheating. So in the track, you probably have a much better groove. That's an important part about the audio editing. Our goal is that you should be able to make good music fast, and this really helps, you know, just selecting your take, quantizing to make sure it's nice, and then without having to re-record, just rearrange it a bit. So back to the track. One thing that's kind of problematic here is that there's a lot of bass just fighting for the frequencies. You hear the kick drum and the synth. They're not best friends. I'm just going to do a quick mixing tip here and use some sidechain compression for the synthesizer. Do all of you kind of know what sidechain compression is? Couple? This is funny because you can ask, do you know what sidechain compression is? Everyone goes, yeah. And you ask, do you know what an LFO is? And everyone goes, what? Do you know what, because sidechain compression has become such a widely used thing that it's become, part of every producer's arsenal. But I'll show you kind of the basic way I generally do it. So I need a compressor here. So I'm simply going to create a compressor. Pretty fine. Here we go. Compressing a bit. So sidechain compression is controlling the amount of compression with another audio signal. That's pretty much what it is. And most techno producers go, well, I will control it with a kick drum. In Reason, you can be a bit smart about it and create another kick drum, not use the actual one that you hear. So, here we go. I'm actually just going to sequence a kick here, 4 on the floor, of course. And this one doesn't make a sound at all. But I can plug it into the sidechain input on the back. So if you don't know Reason, I'm flicking back and forward with the tab button. So sidechain in from the kick drum. You see it's already compressing when the kick's hitting. And since this kick will always be running here, even if I do a break without a kick, this kick will still go strong, which means you can have this pumping effect even without it. If I just play this back, I can tweak the settings a bit. Nice ducking on the quarter notes. Together with the kick, that's what we have. So now it's kind of ducking for the kick, and the bass isn't that money. I mean, this is not the perfect room to listen to bass, I'm sure, but you get my point. One other thing I want to do is just add a sound that I've created. Like I said, I promised myself to make a new patch every song I make. Otherwise, I will feel really bad. So I'm going to load up a Thor synthesizer. This is kind of Reason's flagship synth. It's quite easy to understand why. It's a semi-modular 3 oscillator, 3 filter synth. The beauty of that is that you have tons and tons and tons and tons of options. Right now it's just one analog oscillator right here, sent to one low-pass filter. That's not really fun. So I want to make a pad sound here that I'm just going to use as kind of a layer. You can select from 6 different types of oscillators. From the basic analog that we all know and love, wavetable, like the PPG for example, which is a sampled waveform that you can sweep through. There's also phase modulation. This one is a bit, you don't see this very much. It's a Casio style, the Casio CZ, I think. Use this quite a lot. You can do some really kind of nasty digital tones. You also have FM, 2 sine waves modulating. Really nice, bright bell-like sounds and stuff like that. And probably my favorite, just because it's so easy to use, the multi-oscillator, which is just a stack of oscillator that I can detune. So from this to it sounds, bigger and fatter just by one tiny rotary, which is quite nice. I'm going to use this as the basic for my pad. Pad sounds are big washy things that just kind of float around. So the number one thing you want to do with a pad is make sure the envelope's right. The actual attack and release of the sound. So this is not very pad-like. So I'll bring up the attack. It takes a while to get there. I also want a bit of a tail. So I'll take up the release, and when I release the keys, it will fade out. Right? And that's a basic pad sound. I mean, this actually sounds disturbingly good to be 3 clicks. But I'm going to do some more stuff. I'm going to use this envelope on the filter too. We have a filter envelope on controlling not the volume, but the frequency of this filter. I want this to kind of open slowly and follow the envelope. I'm going to have a long attack and a long release here too. This is how much it affects. It's going to affect it quite a bit. And some resonance. Let's see how this sounds. Much nicer. I'm gonna add 2 more oscillators just to make it a bit bigger and layer them. I'll use 1 analog and 1 wavetable. And to hear these, you need to send them to the right filter. Yeah. Change the octave maybe. And if you're used to this kind of stuff, I'm going to show you something that you might not know. This down here is a mod matrix where you can take pretty much anything and send it pretty much anywhere, which is really, really simple to work with. So I'm going to do some FM, but instead of using an FM oscillator, I'm going to take 2 different ones, the wavetable and analog, and modulate each other. This might sound complicated, but it's just a matter of taking 1 oscillator as the source, the other oscillator's frequency as the destination, and turn the amount up. Get this kind of harsher sound. Send this to the filter. Just use it for a bit of this metallic feedback. And of course, I can control this amount. How much do I actually affect it by choosing something to scale it with? I'm going to use an LFO. An LFO, if you don't know, is a low frequency oscillator. An oscillator waveform is just ridiculously slow. So it goes like this maybe. And that's perfect to just control something, to add some movement. So I'm going to set the amount 59 maybe, to make sure that this LFO right here, the sine wave, changes the FM modulation. Tiny bit more movement, which is quite nice. This is starting to sound like a pretty good pad sound actually. I'm going to record a couple of chords on top of this, and you're going to go, that doesn't sound good, but we'll fix that. C. It sounds okay, but I mean, this is a very kind of jumpy rhythmic track, so the pad sounds a bit out of place almost. So I'm going to use one of Reason's built-in effects, give it some movement, called the alligator, which is a 3-channel gate effect. Super simple to use, just select a pattern and you can hear what it does right away. There's all kinds of settings here. You can change the filter frequencies on the different channels. You can add some effects like delay, and a bit differently, which I think you can't hear because this is in Modular right now. You can also mix in the dry signal, because I did want it to be a bit floaty, but still have this kind of rhythmic character. I can just add the dry here. I have a really nice sound. Probably sound a lot better in the mix too. We're definitely getting there. Another thing I want to mention is rack extensions, which a lot of people don't even know that we have. It was a feature that we launched in the last version, the Reason 6.5, this is 7. Basically, we got a lot of questions from people asking, so where's the plugins? We went, what plugins? We don't have plugins. And then everyone got really sad. The reason we don't have EST and AU plugins, quite a few reasons, but the number one I always say is, well, where does the cable go? Where do I plug it in? Why can't I take this LFO and put it here? You know, this kind of modular thinking and this user interface primarily makes it really easy to work with Reason. But if you would add a floating window with a plugin that looks nothing like the rest of Reason, that would be extremely confusing and probably just lead to a bigger learning curve overall. There's also the problem that third-party plugins are written by third parties with third-party code that we can control. Meaning if they're really bad coders, that plugin can bring down whatever. Now that's actually a big problem. If you buy, only high quality plugins, maybe it won't happen. But if it does, it would bring down your entire project and you will be extremely angry. There's also the stuff like how they handle automation, the file browser. It's a new system for every single plugin you have. So with rack extensions, we try to do things a bit differently. We said, okay, we'll develop a way for other companies to make rack devices that actually behave like rack devices. So let me show you, here's an old classic. The Chord Poly 6. Obviously we didn't do the Chord Poly 6, Chord did the Chord Poly 6. If you didn't know what the Poly 6 was, you would just go, that's a Reason device, right? Because it looks like one, it has the cables, it has the same automation, just right click edit automation, it has the same file browser as the rest of it. But it is a third-party plugin. And this is super important for us, right? You have the same workflow even if you get an external thing. We also have some interesting technical stuff in this one. Sure, it sounds good. But the important thing is, if this would crash for some reason, it would just go quiet and go, well, Chord Poly 6 has stopped working. Do you want to continue with your track? The only option is, okay, because of course you do. And then the next time you load it up, it would just work again. It can't touch anything else. It's completely isolated, which is really important. The other thing is that this is actually future-proofed in various ways. I don't know how many of you, a couple of Logic users, 64 and 32-bit, the eternal battle of the formats. That was actually a huge problem when 64-bit came along and you had to update your DAW, but half of the plugins you use, they don't really work because they're only 32-bit and you need to wait for 10 different companies to release 10 different upgrades. Some of them you have to pay for, you have to download them from different places. It's quite a hassle actually. So what we did here is that the developer, they just send us a chunk of code in our format that we can then compile for pretty much any format. It's completely future-proof in that way. So once we get 128-bit computing, Chord Poly 6 will work. As long as Reason works, every single third-party rack extension will work. It works on Mac, it works on Windows, 32-bit, 64-bit, just download it and you have it. They're all available from just one place too, the Propellerheads shop and your account. Meaning that anywhere you go, if you go to your friend's house or go to Spain and you have a computer there that's not your regular one, you go, shit, I want to make music. Go to your account, download all. You get it in the right format for the computer you have. So that kind of stuff is extremely important. I talked about this in the beginning, that for me, I need to make music really fast. And I need to have stuff that's stable. So that's really, really important for us. Any questions about this? Because I know it's a bit...
What's the best way to collaborate then with other users that haven't got one?
Excellent question. That's also something we take super seriously. So all Reason documents, they're just one document. All the audio files, samples, patches are stored in one document file. So for example, I'll show you an example. Since I work on video game music, I have a partner in crime that I compose with. Luckily he lives in San Francisco, so when I go to bed he goes up and continues making music, so we never miss a deadline. Excellent. And here's an example of a collaboration we did. So with rack extensions, if you got something I don't have, you send me the track, I can still open it perfectly. But the rack extension will have a placeholder instead, a cardboard box that says, here was this thing, and it's bypassed. You can always bounce it if you want. But the important thing to note here is that I can click it and get the 30-day trial we have on every single plugin, try it out and send it back to you, no problem. I can work on the track without that plugin, add tons of stuff, do changes, send it back to you. The plugin's still there in its original state. Or I can just buy it and I can work with you properly, you know? So it will never stop you from collaborating, which is really important. And again, if you're on the same Reason version, you will always be able to share projects. And that's something I think many companies don't take seriously. A lot of people make music together. And if you can't do that, that kind of sucks. So this example is, it's also one of my music making tips, is to call your friend and have him do stuff to your track. I had this idea for a soundtrack we were working on. It was basically some kind of cave music. So I had this idea, okay, I'm gonna have big drums with a lot of reverb. That's always good. So I recorded those. I recorded some electric bass just to make sure I had something that was mine and that I played, a bit more human. I also added a sampled bass that I quite like. Finally, this was pretty much my idea. I had this awesome 8-bar loop. Now what? I had absolutely no idea what to do. And this, I think, is one of the most common things music makers face. How many good 8-bar loops do you have on your hard drive? Probably a couple. I have a vast collection of 8-bar loops. So I sent this song file to my friend. He went, okay, fair enough, I can work with this. He made this really eerie intro with pads and waterfalls and stuff. And suddenly we had a beginning. You know, I got inspired from that. We kept bouncing it back and forwards via Dropbox. It's an excellent way to do it. And that just resulted in a great track, and we got paid on time. So I really recommend actually working with other people in general, even if you don't use Reason. It helps quite a bit. Any other questions about the plugins? There's quite a few of them. Actually, there's a lot of companies that I think is very exciting. These are all established companies. And we have 200 developers working on stuff that might not be finished yet, that I obviously can't talk about. But these were the first ones out. This is only a year old, this technology. But we also have these lovely guys that you've probably never ever heard of. Which is not very strange, because these companies were started because of our plugin port. They went, I'm a Reason user. Yeah, this sounds cool. And they did the stuff that only a Reason user would really appreciate. I'll show you an example that I think is hilarious. One guy went, I do a lot of cabling. I'm sending my kick drum to a million places. So, of course, I will develop a 16-channel audio splitter. That's all it is. Connect one piece of audio, split it into 16 different audio streams. And that sounds like the most boring plugin in the world, but for Reason users, that's a gold mine of stuff you can do. And it's just what? I think it's $7. There's a lot of that kind of stuff, which I find really amazing. There's the one I showed you in the beginning, the chaotic signal generator, where someone went, okay, I need some unpredictability in my control voltage. So I'll make this thing that just does weird math, which I think is amazing. Of course, there's also really high-end stuff like the Poly 6, and we have studio effects like, where is it? The soft tube FET compressor, for example, modeled on the 1176, I believe, and also stuff like the RE2A, modeled on the LA2A, and all these kinds of really high-end mixing gear if you want it. We also have instruments that are quite brilliant. There's actually one I always like to show because it catches people off guard how easy it is, and that's the Antidote. This is a synth that's only developed for Reason, actually. It's one of those developers who went, get behind this platform, and just went to town. So what I like about this, I'll get back to this a lot, but I like to make music fast. If I want a big synth sound, I load this up. And I'll show you why. It has 2 oscillators, which is not very much. Sounds a bit boring. Luckily, you can take every oscillator and go, okay, actually, when I hit one key, I want 1 voice, I want 12. Actually, I want 24, so I'm going to add an octave above that. Actually, I want the other oscillator with another 12. Probably a pulse. Actually, another 12, but a fifth above. So that's 48 voices per key, which is pretty mad. You can do massive sounds. And I haven't even added the sub-oscillators yet. So it's quite easy to make huge sounds. And I mean, if you're into electronic music, especially contemporary, that's pretty much what you need to do nowadays. You need to make a massive sound, play it, then you pretty much have it. I'm gonna actually tweak this into a good sound. The filter a bit, change it to a silent key filter. Use the envelope here. Let a bit of release. It also has an excellent effects section. See down here, I just select the one I want, and you have all the parameters for it. This reverb is actually quite impressive. It's just big. That's a pretty good sound. I'm going to see if I can squeeze this into my track that, if you forgot, sounds like this. Let's see what I can do. I'm about to stop talking, because it's almost 1. No, it's not almost 1, it's 12. Sorry for the Swedish time. But I'm going to quickly show you some completed tracks, just to see what can be done. This is a demo track I did for Reason 7. So if you get Reason 7, you can just download this and steal all my sounds, that's okay. Gary Bromham's coming here to talk about mixing in Reason. I think that's 1:45. Definitely don't miss that, because these mixing tips you can use on any software or hardware with a mixing desk. It's really, really, really useful. But regardless, this is a track I've been working on. It started with this bass line you heard before. That was pretty much the start of it. I took it, right-clicked, and split it into different slices. And move these slices to different tracks to get this really kind of, it's kind of Daft Punk here, must admit, where you just change the sound, the effects. So it's one has bit crushing, one has tape distortion, and just clicks between them playing the same bass line. So I'll show you how it actually ended up when I move them around. It's a pretty smart way to do it. So I'll play the track for you and scroll around the rack a bit so you can see how it's built up. And then if you have any questions afterwards, I'd be happy to answer them.
Reason
example. Any questions about Reason or anything in that?
Yeah, those bass slices there,
Yep.
can you load them into a Rex player? And
Absolutely.
then use the outs?
That's one thing I didn't mention actually. That's a very good thing you brought up. I'm pretty happy. Let's see how far I can undo. Forever, of course, but I want this to not be split up. There we go. So this bass line I played in the beginning. I can export this as a Rex loop, which is a format, if you don't know, a format that we came up with many, many years ago. Just right click and bound as Rex loop. And now, in my rack, I have a brand new Rex loop. Oops, I should probably not. From the bass side. And the cool part about this is I can actually start playing with it. You can also do some weird stuff with the actual loop in the slice edit mode. Reverse a couple of slices. Change the frequency over time. Etc. You can do all kinds of weird tweaky stuff. Which is a great feature of the audio stuff. Anything you record you can export as one of these loops, which can then be, imported into Ableton or Stylus RMX. Pretty much any program on the market today supports Rex File. Any other questions?
Is it easy enough to swap out instruments? So you get a bass line there, just swap it out while it's actually playing? Just see how
Yeah, in this case, it's an audio file, so that is kind of hard to swap out. But let's go back to the one I was working on. Here's the one. If I want to swap out this sound, I can simply go to the browser, click open, and since the browser basically is the Reason browser, I can just go, okay, all the instruments, find whatever I want. Let's see, maybe a piano or something. You just load it up. Hear how it sounds. A bit less impressive, isn't it? Let me try another one. That's very nice. So yeah, I can take any patches anytime, regardless of what did the patch. If it's one of our stuff, if it's an external plugin, it doesn't matter. Any other questions?
Is there any reason when you create other tracks, do you use any other software or is it completely self-contained?
It's completely self-contained. I mean, you can use it with any software you already have using Rewire, where you basically chain this one and another DAW together, sending the audio from this to your other DAW. Not the other way around, sadly. So a lot of people use this with, say, line or Logic and run it in tandem. But Reason has come such a long way, especially in the last few years, that I'm just using it.
And you master on it as well?
Yeah, I master on it as well. And I make money with it as well. Which I guess is the best review you can give when I actually create tracks and get paid. So yeah, you have all the mastering tools you might need. There's external plugins if you want more, like the Ozone maximizers in there, for example. So it's pretty much self-contained. And that's part of the beauty of it too, that you need to launch one program and everything's in there. And it's using a similar interface. It's using a workflow that when you learn it, you pretty much know it offhand.
So something like remixing where I'll be giving a vocal track, I can chuck that in there.
Absolutely, and since the time stretching is so ridiculously good, that actually helps quite a lot. I love the time stretching. I'm going to show you one more thing with that before I promise I will shut up. See you later. Yes, because the time stretching, we spend so much time on this. Primarily because it's actually quite hard to get right. So here's a track by Olivia Broadfield. It's somewhere off countryside, never done where. This is all audio tracks. Sounds like this.
We could be good, but just not now. And that's one thing you should know.
And I can change the tempo of everything quite a lot.
It's just the early hours. Remember when you said the darkest hours are before dawn?
What, 50, 60 BPM above?
Remember when you cried that no one knows you like I do? It took a year
Nothing can do that and sound that good. I like bragging about that because it's actually really, 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 really good. And that's the time stretching that runs the slice stretching, every audio track. So it's quite an advanced thing. And I'm doing it on all the tracks while playing them back in real time. Pretty cool, actually. Any final questions?
Do you ever use it with video?
No, I don't. We don't have video supporting reason. There are some third-party applications that allow video supporting reason. But when I do stuff, I generally don't do it the traditional way. I don't have any trailers. So, no, I haven't used it. But that's a perfect way where if you have Logic or Live, you can just change the use to make Logic. There's all kinds of solution to it, but right now there's no native videos. If you have any other questions later or so, I will probably be here, unless when I'm getting lunch and stuff. You can reach me at Twitter and Facebook. I'm basically the social media guy, so I'm running all of these channels. So if I say something stupid first, I'm sorry, but that's where you can reach me. So Twitter at PropellerheadsSW, Facebook.com/Propellerhead. So any questions, just let me know. And thanks a lot for coming.